So, Rep. Morales, you're up. And Representative, it is the practice of this commission to interrupt the presenters with questions as we move through. So if that's okay with you, I welcome you to stop the rep if you want clarification on some of his points.
Well, thank you for prefacing with that, Chairwoman Speakman. And by all means, please, if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to just interrupt at any point in time. More than happy to answer. And as you will note, there is a 4-page handout that has been shared with all of you in regards to the structure of the proposed program that I will be presenting on this afternoon. So first and foremost, I just wanted to thank Speaker Shikarchi for recommending that I present to the Housing Affordability Study Commission, along with Chairwoman Speakman for granting me with this opportunity. Because tonight I will be sharing a following legislative proposal with the goal of receiving feedback and answering any clarifying questions. Because as we are all familiar, our state is in a severe housing crisis, which in large part is due to the lack of housing supply that exists, specifically affordable housing. And as a result of this housing scarcity combined with a growing state population, renters all across Rhode Island are experiencing increasing rents of nearly 15% on an annual basis. This in of itself has led to housing displacement as renters are forced to leave their previous homes with the hope of being able to find a more affordable option that fits their household's budget. I have heard of specific cases in my neighborhood where we have had families of 5 that are forced to downsize and go from a 3-bedroom apartment to a 2-bedroom apartment because it is more affordable for the household. And to put this all into context, the 2022 rental survey conducted by the Rhode Island Housing in February of 2023 noted that the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Rhode Island was $1,996, an average increase of 8.7% from the previous year. In fact, Providence, our capital city, was reported to have experienced the highest rent increase nationwide, according to Zillow's 2023 fall report, is that they noted that the average rent in Providence for a 2-bedroom apartment went from $1,400 in 2019 to $1,800 in 2022 to $2,074 in 2023. Therefore, it is easy to understand and see why nearly 50% of renters across Rhode Island are considered to be house cost burdened, which means that they are spending more than 30% of their monthly income towards rent. I, for one, will just share that more often than not, the calls, the emails, and the messages that I receive from constituents daily is whether I know of an affordable apartment unit that I can connect them with. Or I'll get a call asking me if it is legal for their landlord to price gouge them and increase their rent by more than $300 going into a new year. So all that said, the need is clear. The working people and families of Rhode Island need affordable rents. We need statewide policies that will encourage rents that people can afford without being housing cost burdened. Currently, however, there are no state or local policies that encourage or require landlords to offer affordable rents. And while there are significant investments that have been made to increase the production of affordable housing, as all of us on this commission know, that is going to take years to be fully developed. At the same time, I recognize that stabilizing rents through a rent control model is unlikely to be achieved at the state level due to a lack of political support from lawmakers and municipal leaders. And this is why I'm here to share a proposal that offers a market-based incentive to help increase the supply of affordable rental units across our state. So as noted in your handout, I am proposing a 1-year pilot program that would administer a tax rebate to eligible landlords that are offering a 12-month lease agreement with affordable monthly rents to tenants earning 80% or less of the area median income. For starters, affordable rent would be measured using standards found in HUD Title 24 Code of Federal Regulations 92.252, otherwise known as the rent limits for the home program. For the purpose of this program, we would use the Rhode Island, Massachusetts Metro Fair Market Rent Area High Home Rent Limit, which is updated annually. On page 4 of your handout, there is a table that specifically outlines what is classified as the high home rent limit. As noted, affordability levels would be measured and set as the following: $1,171 and under for a one-bedroom unit, $1,409 and under for a two-bedroom unit, $1,697 and under for a three-bedroom unit, $1,873 and under for a four-bedroom unit, and $2,048 and under for a five-bedroom unit. Now, in terms of the landlords that would be eligible for this program, the landlord would have to live in the same residential building where they are renting out the units to their tenants, otherwise known as an owner-occupied home. This often takes the form of a multifamily home, where perhaps there are 3 floors, the landlord lives on the 3rd floor and rents out the 1st and 2nd floor to their tenants. Naturally, they would have to follow all existing housing and tenant laws, not limited to code enforcement. In addition, the landlord would have to agree to abide by just cause eviction policies. In other words, if they would like to evict or pursue eviction on a tenant while being a part of this program, it would have to be for a just cause, such as non-payment of rent and or intentional property damage. Now, to ensure that the households that are most susceptible of being housing cost burdened are benefiting from this program, a tenant would have to meet the following requirements: earn 80% or below of the area median income, or be a housing voucher recipient. In addition, they would have to live within a legal housing unit. So in other words, it cannot be a makeshift garage or a structure that doesn't actually have a residential address. And lastly, they would not be allowed to be a relative of the landlord. As for the structure and timeline of this tax rebate program, it would be open for eligible landlords who enter an eligible 12-month lease agreement with an eligible tenant on January 1st, 2025 or after. The following tax rebates would be awarded for the following affordable units: a $1,200 rebate for an affordable one-bedroom unit, a $1,500 rebate for an affordable two-bedroom unit, and a $1,500 rebate for an affordable three-bedroom unit or larger. Furthermore, it is important to note that the maximum rebate that a landlord would be allowed to collect altogether would be limited to $3,600. In terms of governance and oversight, the Division of Taxation would be tasked with the implementation of this pilot program, given their successful experiences managing past tax rebate programs, such as the Drive EV Individual Tax Rebate Program, the Circuit Breaker Relief Program for seniors, and the 2022 Child Tax Rebate. And as a part of implementing this program, the division would promulgate the rules and regulations related to the application process that a qualifying landlord and tenant would have to complete in order to be approved for the program. This would be including, but not limited to, verifying property ownership, proof of the lease agreement, verifiable income from the tenant, identity verification, and any additional documentation that is deemed necessary. In addition, they would be the body that would administer rebates to the landlord upon the completion of the 12-month lease. They would also be required to close the program and stop accepting applications upon a projected exhaustion of funds. And to launch this pilot program and measure the impact that it is having on our state, the pilot would need a modest allocation of roughly $2 million in the FY25 state budget. Using the tax rebate figures referenced, this tax rebate pilot program would be projected to directly benefit between 1,000 to 1,600 households by providing them access to an affordable rental unit. An affordable rental unit that may have not been available had it not been for this existing pilot program. Overall, I believe that this program can be a cost-effective policy measure that would support our neighbors, our families, and our seniors that are in desperate need of affordable housing options. So at this time, I'm more than happy to take any questions and to clarify any standards, but most importantly, I would like to receive feedback from the Commission because I'm still in the process of drafting this legislation and want to make sure that I receive the feedback before doing so.
Thank you, Representative Morales. Before we go to questions, I want to express my appreciation for bringing this to us. We've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years talking about process and production and financing, but have not focused enough on tenants and on trying to provide immediate release to them. So I really appreciate that. Waiting for buildings to be constructed is frustrating for many of us. So I appreciate this kind of proposal. It's different from what we focused on. And I saw someone down there. Melina, I'm going to go to Leader Chippendale first, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rep, for presenting something outside of the normal frame of what we're doing. I do have a couple of questions. And honestly, you may not have the answer. I don't know. What does your proposal do to address the deed restriction requirement for an affordable unit?
So there is no reference to a unit having to be deed restricted. We would have to amend our existing low and moderate income housing laws to ensure that if a unit like this did go into the market, that it could be counted towards affordable housing. Because as we know, as of right now, we do require that deed restriction.
And I would recommend, if that modification were to be made, that it does not eliminate the requirement for a deed restriction, but yet rather modifies it so that a one-year deed restriction can be accepted in its place. Would the tenants be subject to the current monitoring agent, which we require of all folks living in affordable units?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. Head math is not my strong suit, as you've probably experienced. I think I heard that a landlord who has made a 3-bedroom unit affordable, rentable on an affordable scale, would receive an annual $1,500
Rebate. That's
rebate.
correct.
So now, if you do the math over the monthly, over each month of that $1,500, it's $97 or $6 a month that the landlord is getting back, essentially.
It would be a little over 100, but your math is
so let's
roughly
take it's a little over 100. Based on the figures of what a 3-family is renting for in the current market, that landlord's going to take it. He's going to take it hard if he just takes that $100 as a reward for lowering the rent so much that it's considered affordable. And the private property owner who is in a profit-based model, which most are, is not going to be willing to do that. I think that's a reality that you have to kind of factor into your thought process as you continue to develop this plan. And I'm happy to work with you on that.
No, and I appreciate that, Representative, because one thing I just want to know is even the financial figures around this in terms of what the rebate would actually look like is still open for feedback. I've been meeting with some smaller landlords. When it comes to the 1 to 2 bedroom units, I've received pretty positive feedback that would be enough of an incentive. I have heard very similar to what you just echoed right now, that perhaps for a 3-bedroom, they would like a larger incentive.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on when they got into that house, when they bought it, in what market did they purchase it. Some may be able to afford a little bit more of a hit than others. If they've gotten into that building in the past 6 years, there's absolutely no way it would make financial sense, but for those special occasions. Again, happy to continue talking with you about this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Melina?
Thank you. Thanks, Rep. Morales. I think this is a really creative idea, and we certainly do want to work on it with you. I think when we first heard about it, we were more conceptualizing this just as a way to help stabilize rent. I think I might feel a little differently if we were counting them towards actual affordable housing units. I think there's a lot that goes into that chart on an annual basis, and the timing of when this would come out relative to the production of that chart, and the fact that it would be moving every year would be exceptionally difficult, I think, for municipalities to have any level of predictability about where they land in their progress towards actually producing affordable housing. I think just on the heels of the leader's comment, I think mathematically you're really looking at about a loss of about $10,000 to $12,000 a year in rental income. So I would really reevaluate your credit to see if there's a closer proximity to what that loss would be. Maybe looking at some tax credit property tax credit incentives, potentially, if there's an ability to capitalize on, not that I want to say this word in this moment, but the 8% law. I'm also curious, is the tax rebate, does it function like a refundable credit, or does it fund more as a reduction on one's tax liability only to the point of zero?
It would be in the form of a refundable tax credit.
Okay. And the only other comment I had, well, two comments, I guess. One, as a monitoring agent, I think we did a little research into what other parts of the country have done. And the number one thing that did come out of places that have done this is that there is a high prevalence of fraud if you don't have appropriate income checks and rent checks, that there are lots of ways people can say they're doing the thing. So, really collaborating with people who are well positioned to help you to do the certification. And I noticed that you set a sort of singular standard for rents. The way our state largely functions, and it does reference this on the home high rents, is that we have 3 MSAs in this state. And so I think having a program that acknowledges, and this income chart is actually not an income chart that we use. We would use the MSA income charts that align to the high home rents. So allowing for some flexibilities in the higher income MSAs, because I think when you work off of just the Providence Fall River MSA, you're going to really disincentivize the 2 MSAs that are much higher income, which could have higher rents, but also have higher income tenants who could be eligible for this program. So actually allowing for some variability there.
Is that the Westerly area and the Newport area?
Yeah, so it's Westerly, Hopkinton, New Shoreham is 1 MSA, and then Middletown, Newport, Portsmouth.
Thank you. Congressman Cicilline?
Thank you, Representative, for this proposal, and I really appreciate your creativity, because I think so often we hear proposals that put the burden for the affordability of a unit on the homeowner or the developer, and this kind of shifts it collectively to the community or to the state in this case. So I think it's really the bright way to start thinking about this. The two things that I would just raise is, I think for it to be successful, that rebate number has to, it would seem to me, meet what the market misses in making it affordable or close to it. Otherwise, there won't be an economic incentive to do it. So I think when I saw those rebate numbers, I assumed they were monthly, which would actually do that. But if it's annually, I don't think it does. And I realize that means you could do it for less folks, but it seems otherwise it will be difficult to encourage people to do it. The other question I have is, in the proposal, if I'm reading it correctly, the landlords would be required to certify that they're living in the same residential building where they're renting out units. And I wonder kind of why you created that limitation, which would seem like it would preclude lots of potential
No, that's correct. So generally speaking, the initial model that I'm presenting to all of you does incorporate the language of having a quote-unquote owner-occupied landlord. And the reason for that was to have a smaller control group as a part of this pilot program, just to ensure that we have limitations around potential abuse or fraud. And I say that because, as we know, there are certain people within our communities that own a multitude of properties. And I just wanted to ensure that if it was a landlord that was already living in that existing property, more often than not, those are the landlords that tend to already have some level of affordable rents in place and also take much better care of their units. And most importantly, the tenant is actually able to get in contact with them as needed. But I myself would certainly be open to expanding on the language and perhaps being able to increase the amount of eligibilities that would exist for landlords. I would just shy away from allowing for perhaps an LLC or a larger corporation or developer to be able to benefit from this.
Thank you so much.
Bob Marshall, please.
I was going to ask a very similar question of why you came up with that, and I was coming more from the point of view of, it seems like most of those are going to be smaller buildings, and it seems like this might be more workable in a larger building where you have more market rents to offset it against. Whereas if you're down to, you're only collecting one other rent than the one that you're taking a hit on, there isn't a lot of room for where you're going to come up with the money to maintain that building. So I think you might want to consider. It's, you know, I agree that we don't want to be just reinforcing a lot of the things that's causing the problems of these absentee landlords and out of state, but we put some restriction on it, but allow it to get into that larger building model. It might be more workable there, and even in the pilot, it might be worth looking at, you know, that is it more workable in larger buildings going forward. So.
No, thank you for that feedback, Bob. And very similar to what Mr. Cicilline had shared as well, my goal would be to ensure that we are prioritizing the quote-unquote like mom and pop landlords, right, that aren't managing a multitude of portfolios of buildings and investments, because we saw what has happened, unfortunately, in Providence with 8 Law, where we have seen developers abuse that tax break and that tax credit. And I would just want to make sure that if we're actually helping working people and working families access affordable rents, it's because their units are in decent condition. And most importantly, people are actually paying affordable rents.
Brenda Clement?
Emily, I don't know if I'm. So again, I love the concept, and I agree that some of the details and the incentive is probably not high enough, particularly as you focus on owner occupancy. Have you thought about trying to also tie it to homestead exemptions? Because again, that could be a way to increase the incentive for individual property owners.
So it certainly could, and when I was doing my research, I just found that when it came to the homestead exemption, every municipality operated in a different way, shape, or form. So if we had more uniformed laws, I feel like it would be easier when it came to homestead to make that tax, make this rebate or credit be aligned with it. But because it wasn't, I just thought the most direct fashion would be to do a refundable rebate model.
Did I see Emily?
Representative, thank you for this. I have a few questions, if you don't mind, from the municipal perspective. I think we've heard from a number of municipalities that there are concerns about capacity. And when talking about needing to verify residential address or compliance with code enforcement, I'm wondering how the Department of Revenue potentially would be the monitoring agent, or what are you envisioning some type of contract? Because as the 39 cities and towns have expressed, there are concerns about capacity to take on that type of additional monitoring.
Yeah, so that's why I appreciated Melina's feedback earlier around having monitoring agents in place and making sure that we have the staff contracted to ensure that, again, when we're talking about code enforcement, we're talking about ensuring that tenants are actually paying the necessary affordable rent that was outlined in the lease, that it's being monitored and that there is oversight. Because my biggest concern with any tax credit program in general, and specific to this proposal I put forward, is ensuring that there isn't abuse or fraud. And one of the main reasons I even outlined in the bill itself, or in the proposed bill, would be that the tenant can't be a relative of the landlord, right? So I agree wholeheartedly that we should have monitoring agents and also look at contracting staff to support municipalities with ensuring that what a landlord applied with to get this tax rebate is actually true.
Representative Giraldo. Oh, sorry. Another question? Go ahead.
I had some additional,
Go ahead.
if you don't
Yep.
mind. Sorry.
Go right ahead.
The City of Providence operates a down payment assistance program through our federal home dollars we receive. And often we're seeing that the only way many low-income families in Providence can afford to purchase homes is to purchase a multifamily and qualify for their mortgage based on the fact that they'll be receiving market rate rent. So a concern I would just flag here is, are we potentially not creating enough of incentive to cover the fact that many low-income families that are owner-occupants are needing that market rate rent to be able to pay their mortgages and to build wealth in their own low-income households?
Well, I think that's why they're charging market-based rent, though, at that point. Like, this would be designed for someone who is intentionally going to be charging affordable levels of rent. And while I would love it if we had a model in place that would allow for someone who is charging market-based rent to have some level of an incentive, the main focus for this bill is to ensure that the rent that a tenant's paying is actually below market, and that there's an incentive in place for the landlord to not have such a net loss when actually providing a service to the community in this case.
That's helpful clarification. Thank you.
Rep. Giraldo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Morales, thank you for bringing this creative approach forward. Like you, I get many of those phone calls, and it's really difficult when there's no easy answer. So I appreciate you bringing this to the forefront. My question is, it seems like you've done a considerable amount of research. Are there any other states that have implemented something similar to this, and are we building off of any lessons learned?
Yeah, so unfortunately, most of the states, similar to what we've seen nationally, are more incentivized around doing tax credits for developers, whether that's a low-income tax credit or having a municipal-focused tax credit for the purpose of rehabilitating buildings that will then be affordable. But the issues with those tax credits, more often than not, is they're not always necessarily tied back to rent. It just goes back to, are you renting to a low-income person? If so, here's a tax credit. And the purpose of this bill is to ensure that the rent levels are stabilized in a way where not only are you renting to a person of lower income status, but you are ensuring that their rent is below market.
Melina, and, okay, Melina, and then Rita, and then Leader Chippendale.
Just a point of clarification, I think on Emily's comment, I don't want to presume, but I believe she was asking about verifying that things are legal rental units or code enforcement, and that would be well outside of the scope of a monitoring agent. I think, monitoring agents being one, it's me. There's there's not a robust department of people. So I think, there would need to be some type of municipal coordination, or at the state level, not probably the Department of Revenue, a department who is actually like overseeing and coordinating, because I do think there are a lot of moving parts here that need to work together, and it isn't anything, just in transparency, like I couldn't do all of this for you. I could do income certifications, but I couldn't verify. I don't know anything about code enforcement. So I do think there is either a municipal component, or at the state level, maybe, whatever department is in charge of building codes could somehow assist. But I do think you would actually need an entity that is coordinating this for just, again, I think successful pilot, right? A pilot that doesn't end up working doesn't really meet the goal that you're looking for. So we want to make sure we have all the parts in the right place.
Thank you. Rita?
Representative, I love this idea. I think it's really creative. I was having one thought, and based on personal experience and also what I've seen with a lot of clients in the real estate industry, a lot of small-time investors, they tend to have a little more flexibility, let's say when they're moving on to their second property. So it might be property owners who started with a 2 or 3 family, then moved on to, say, a single, and now they're renting their multi. Owners like that, or people like myself, my rental properties are single family homes, so we wouldn't qualify necessarily under the way it's structured now. But if you want to target these small time investors, maybe it could be something more like not necessarily owner occupied, but just a cap on maximum number of units owned in the state, like say, I don't know, 5 units.
And I like that approach, because again, going back to what I had shared earlier, I don't want this tax rebate or credit or incentive to go back to someone who has a portfolio of a dozen plus different properties across the state. But in a case where, again, it's a portfolio of no more than like 5 units, for example, that's definitely manageable.
Thank you. Leader?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep, have you come up with a total figure as far as what the total rebate would be?
Yeah, so as outlined, the rebate figures were $1,200 for a one-bedroom unit,
No, I mean like for the
$1,500.
entire program.
Sorry?
I mean for the entire program. Do you have a cap?
Yeah, so it'd be $3,600 that one as an individual can be able to receive, and then when you calculate
I'm talking what the program would cost to it be administered, let's say, in the city of Providence. How much would it cost in totality for all the homes that qualified?
Well, it'd be for the landlords that actually apply, and that's why I made the point earlier that the Division of Taxation would be responsible that once there's a projected exhaustion of funds, that they stop accepting applications. Because one would get a rebate after those 12 months. But as soon as one applies and they are approved and told, all right, as long as this lease is completed, you're going to get this guaranteed rebate after the fact, the Division of Taxation can keep track of how many applications have come in and have been approved, and we can start estimating, all right, how many rebates are we going to be administering going into this next year?
And perhaps I missed it in here. Is that, and they stop doing that when it hits $1 million worth of rebates they've given out?
It always depends on how much this program would be funded. And in this proposal, I have asked for $2 million
So
from
that
FY25.
funding would be then coming from the state, not the municipality?
That is correct. It would be coming from the state, yes.
Okay. So just to reflect back on one of the comments that you had made earlier about your concerns with tax credits that go to developers and that they wouldn't have the same effect. The tax credits that go to developers are imperative to the developers for them to be able to even create affordable units or mixed use developments. So they do, in a sense, create affordable units, just not directly to the renter per se. But the tax credits in that sense work. So I'm just going to close with a comment that you may have already heard from me recently. We're proposing to spend more money to make something affordable. We're
correct.
increasing the cost of government. That's what's made our housing unaffordable. I think just holistically that right there is going down the same path that has led to our unaffordability. But I don't think that this is hopeless. I'd love to continue to hear more about it. And if there are solutions that will actually drive down the actual cost, then I think it's something I could support. Look forward to what comes up.
No, I appreciate that, Leader. But the issue is if we wanted to do this without any cost associated, we would need a rent control model of some sort. And the political
Well, we would need to cut spending. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Any other questions or comments for Representative Morales? Marco.
I just want to commend Representative Morales for all the hard work and research that he's put into this proposal. The Rhode Island Coalition to End Homelessness is firmly behind this proposal. We are seeing bleeding into the homelessness system faster than we can keep up with, so we're actively looking for solutions that could stop that bleeding, and we see this proposal as something that would have an immediate effect, and we just want to thank you for putting this forward.
Okay, yeah. You want to ask that question now? Okay, thank you. Other questions? Thank you. If things occur to you as you contemplate this proposal, it's Rep. Morales' email is the same as all of ours, rep-morales@rilegislature.gov. So thank you very much for coming before us. It's an innovative proposal. As always, when you bring proposals forward to the legislature, you've done your homework. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.